All right, so let's get started.
Privileged to be here. Thank you. So Mark, you this morning gave me my first ride in a self-driving car. And
I did not drive. The car drove.
I've been listening to this, the enthusiasms of tech reporters and so forth for years, so great to see it. So I have two questions. First of all, I'm 100% sold. Part of the experience was convincing me that the car is a decent driver. I'm sold. Car's a great driver. When can I buy it, and how much is it going to cost?
Well, we announced a couple of weeks ago that our intent is to have a fully autonomous vehicle, what they call a level 4 vehicle. And there's lots of, discussion around what is an autonomous vehicle. The Society of Automotive Engineers, they have 5 levels of autonomy. A level 4 vehicle is a vehicle where the passenger never has to be prepared to take control. So our intent is to have a level 4 vehicle, as I mentioned, without a steering wheel, without gas pedals or brake pedals, in 2021 in a ride-sharing or ride-hailing service. So not initially available for, let's say, personal purchase, but in the ride-hailing service. And of course, the vehicle, because of the technology, will cost more, although that cost is coming down. And that's why it's so compelling in a ride-hailing service, because when you take the driver out, that's the biggest cost of a ride-hailing service. And that's probably one of the reasons why a majority of the ride-hailing services aren't making any money. So it's very compelling.
So ride-hailing service in 5 years, in a limited number of them or everywhere? And then when can I actually buy one for the family?
Well, we expect when we launch it, it's going to be in limited areas. For example, we view it in large cities and dense areas. And the reason for that is because we need to launch them in what we call geo-fenced areas. What that means is mapping. All these areas need to be mapped. And so, the greatest need will be in cities as people want to get around, and it's tough to get around. And so we see it in those cities first.
And then in that car in 5 years, how much will the self-driving technology cost? How much does it add to the cost of the car?
Well, today it adds a good amount of cost. What you usually see when you're developing new technology through the cost usually comes down through two means: scale and by improvements in the technology. So we expect between now and 2021 we'll further make some progress on there, and then as the decade goes on, further progress, and that's whereby probably around a few years later, mid-decade, we would make vehicles available for people to purchase for themselves as opposed to just in a ride-hailing service.
And you mentioned that everyone has a different definition of self-driving. It's a driver-assisted all the way through what you're describing, stage 4, no pedals, no nothing. There's a company in Silicon Valley that is experimenting with a technology like this, and the cars are, shall we say, a design departure from the cars that we are looking at. So the car that you will have in 2021, will it look ridiculous?
Well, we're not in the business of ridiculous vehicles. It will look very, very nice. But I think the thing that it opens up for us, think about this. When you're a passenger in the vehicle and you're not focused on driving, think about the excitement around, for our designers, how to think about the interior, how that's designed. Think about, well, you can imagine all the things that you do in a car today, or can do in a car. Think about all the things you can do when you don't have to be focused on driving. You can design lots of things just using the interior for a lot of different use cases, if I can use that term.
And one of the things I noticed this morning was the drive went perfectly. We even had a pedestrian cross in front. The car was very polite and stopped way before the stop sign, and the person was very safely off the road. Then we encountered an unplanned pedestrian. And this unplanned pedestrian said, "No, you go first." The car waited very quietly and didn't do anything. This I would describe as a small hurdle that has not been solved yet. The car didn't know who was going to win the polite contest. What other hurdles have to be solved before 2021 and before we all get our family self-driving cars? What are the big issues?
Well, I think there's a number of hurdles. One, I would call it into 4 buckets. There's the technology hurdle, there's the regulatory hurdle, there's the economic hurdle in terms of bringing the cost down, and just the adoption hurdle of people getting used to this. But there's also, in the technology bucket, if I could call it that, there's the traditional, you have to be able to develop technology for the rules of the road. And then you have to develop the intuition for not the rules of the road, right? Let me give you an example. You come to a four-way stop, and you happen to come to that four-way stop the same time another car does. Today, I'm looking at the other car, seeing if it's inching forward, or I look at the driver in the eyes and I say, okay, they're going, so I'm going to let them go. We have to be able to anticipate that. Or whether you show up in a construction area and a policeman or woman is there directing traffic. So how do we develop for hand signals and things of that nature? That is the work in front of us, and that's why we're so excited about tackling that.
And part of the reason I was so sold by the experience was I actually needed no convincing, because I've heard many of the companies that are working on this in Silicon Valley and many other car company executives say, the deep secret is the cars are already way better drivers than human beings. And one executive actually confessed that to me. She was a marketing executive for a very high-end car, and she said, this kind of creates a problem for us because we've spent the last 50 years selling the ultimate driving machine, and now we have to sell it will drive you, but you don't actually have to drive anymore. Does this create a marketing problem for you? Now that you say, hey, it's just like a bus, just get in, it'll take you.
Well, there's going to be a spectrum of drivers going forward. There's going to be a spectrum of folks that are always going to want to drive and have that pleasure of driving. There's also going to be a lot of folks that view driving as a chore, and they want to be freed from that. And I think from our standpoint in our company, we've used the term fun to drive, and that's still very valid going forward. But we also added fun to ride so that we can take into account both of those.
The other thing you notice if you follow self-driving is that there are, it seems, at least a half a dozen, if not more, very serious, well-funded companies working on it, all having cool things to announce all the time. You're competing with companies that have never built automobiles before, which certainly would seem to be an advantage, and companies that have built technology from day one and services and so forth. Who's going to win, ultimately? Who has the advantage as we go forward 4 or 5 years?
Well, I can only speak to Ford, and I think our advantage is a couple-fold. One is we've been working on autonomous vehicle development for more than 10 years. We were the only automaker to participate in our team in the original DARPA challenge back over 10 years ago. So we've been working on this for 10 years. When you look at the other advantages that we have, we, for years, have built high-volume product with quality and scale and affordable cost for many years. That's important going forward. But we also have this globally recognized and admired brand, which help us not only attract new customers, it also helps us to attract great partners as we work on this. We also have a finance arm that a lot of our competitors would love to have, and as we think about payments going forward. And we have this very strong distribution network that knows how to sell and service vehicles. All those things are extremely important, and that I think we bring to the party. But also at the same time, I think another thing that's very underestimated by a lot of folks is the systems integration you need. We are the ultimate systems integrator. For years, we have integrated hardware technology, software technology, and made them work seamlessly. And that's really important going forward, particularly with a vehicle.
And one of the things I learned this morning is that there are several components to self-driving technology that are very important. One is the map. One is obviously the car itself with the sensors, LiDAR, that do that. There is the software that runs it. Ultimately, where's the greatest value add? Like, what is it that Ford will make as opposed to buying from others? And how does that set you apart?
Well, I think first off, overall, when we intend to come out with a vehicle, we expect it to work well, work seamlessly. I think the other advantages that we have as a company, as we think about it, will also come down to what's the experience you get as you call up the vehicle, as you experience the vehicle. That will be very important going for us as well for customers. So I think there's a lot of things in there that allows us to differentiate ourselves versus the competitors.
And let's talk about Google, Apple, companies fiercely competitive, known for technology. As you look down the road, yes, you have a wonderful history of making and selling cars. You think that history will allow you to compete with them, or do you believe the Silicon Valley story, that this is just going to be completely disrupted, it's something totally new, the old line companies are never the ones that lead the way, it will always be a Silicon Valley disruptor?
Well, I strongly believe it first starts with the attitude that you take as a company. And you heard from my comments, we as a management team and as a company, we now understand that the world has moved from just a mindset of owning vehicles to a mindset of owning them and sharing them. And that attitude is a really important part of how you approach things. So we are really we're embracing our core business of designing and developing great cars, utilities, and trucks. And we're really embracing these opportunities around the usage of our products in terms of these mobility services. And I think, again, as you step back and think how we're approaching this, we have always said, listen, we will do things on our own. Some things we will partner with. Other opportunities we will acquire, just like we acquired a software company a couple of weeks ago to help in the autonomous vehicle area. But I think very importantly that we've embraced this, and it's not moving from an old business, meaning the core business, to a new business in the mobility area. It's just moving to a bigger business. And we're really embracing this and not viewing it as a threat.
And